There's a moment that happens in every conversation, every meeting, every social interaction where someone decides they have power over you. It's subtle at first, a slight dismissal of your idea, a condescending tone wrapped in false politeness, a challenge to your authority disguised as innocent questioning. And in that moment, most people do exactly what their opponent wants them to do. They try to rebuild what's being torn down. They scramble to restore their standing, to prove their worth, to defend their position. But what they don't realize is that the battle for confidence isn't won by those who build themselves up. It's won by those who strategically tear others down. You see this everywhere. The colleague who undermines you in meetings by asking clarifying questions that are really designed to expose gaps in your knowledge. The acquaintance who compliments you while simultaneously planting seeds of doubt. The rival who appears supportive while systematically chipping away at your self-assurance. Most people respond to these attacks by trying to prove themselves stronger, smarter, more capable. They work harder, speak louder, fight back directly. But this is precisely the trap, because the moment you're defending your confidence, you've already admitted it can be attacked. Machiavelli understood something that most people never grasp. Confidence isn't built through strength demonstrations. It's destroyed through strategic weakness exploitation. The prince who lasted wasn't the one who constantly proved his power. He was the one who made his enemies doubt their own. This is the fundamental difference between those who hold power and those who lose it. The powerful don't waste energy building themselves up. They invest their energy in breaking others down. Here's the brutal truth that separates the strategically minded from the emotionally reactive, breaking C. One's confidence isn't about being cruel or malicious. It's about understanding that confidence is a psychological construct, not a reality. It's built on perception, maintained through validation, and destroyed through systematic doubt. Introduction. When you understand the architecture of confidence, you can dismantle it with surgical precision. Not through obvious attacks that trigger defensive responses, but through subtle manipulations that create internal collapse. The conventional approach to dealing with confident opponents is to match their energy, to prove you're just as capable, just as worthy of respect. But Machiavelli would laugh at this approach because it accepts their frame entirely. It says, yes, this is a contest of confidence, and I'm going to try to win by being more confident than you. But the truly strategic mind rejects this framework entirely. Instead of competing in their confidence game, you change the game completely. You make confidence itself seem unstable, questionable, built on shaky foundations. This isn't about becoming a sociopath or abandoning your moral compass. It's about recognizing that in any social dynamic, someone is going to control the psychological terrain. Someone is going to set the emotional temperature, determine who feels secure and who feels uncertain. The question isn't whether this manipulation will happen. The question is whether you'll be the one wielding it or the one subjected to it. The most dangerous people in any room aren't the ones who appear most confident. They're the ones who can make others question their own confidence without those others even realizing what's happening. They're the puppet masters of self-doubt, the architects of internal uncertainty. They understand that a person's greatest enemy isn't external opposition, it's internal questioning. And once you can trigger that internal voice of doubt, once you can make someone question their own perceptions and capabilities, you don't need to defeat them. They'll defeat themselves. What you're about to learn isn't just about winning individual interactions. It's about fundamentally shifting how you approach all social dynamics. Instead of hoping people will respect your confidence, you'll learn to control whether they feel confident at all. Instead of building walls to protect your self-assurance, you'll learn to create earthquakes that shake the foundations of theirs. This is the difference between playing defense and playing offense in the game of psychological power. Machiavelli's insight was profound. The most effective power is the kind that makes its targets complicit in their own defeat. You don't break someone's confidence by attacking it directly. You break it by making them question whether it was ever real in the first place. By the end of this exploration, you'll understand not just how to protect yourself from confidence attacks, but how to become the kind of person who controls the confidence levels of everyone around you. This is power in its purest form, not the ability to impose your will, but the ability to shape how others think and feel about themselves. The reason most people fail to break someone else's confidence effectively is that they misunderstand what confidence actually is. They think it's armor that needs to be pierced with stronger attacks. But confidence isn't armor at all. It's more like a house of cards, impressive and seemingly solid, but dependent on every piece supporting every other piece. Remove the right foundation card, and the entire structure collapses. The key is knowing which card to pull. Psychologically, confidence rests on 3 pillars: certainty about one's capabilities, certainty about one's perceptions, and certainty about one's social standing. Most direct attacks target the first pillar by questioning someone's abilities, but this triggers immediate defensive responses because people are prepared to defend their competence. The Machiavellian approach is far more subtle and devastating. Instead of attacking what they can do, you attack what they think they know. The human mind craves certainty above almost everything else. When we feel certain about our understanding of a situation, our role in it, and how others perceive us, we feel confident. But introduce doubt into any of these areas, and the entire confidence structure becomes unstable. This is why the most effective confidence breakers never tell someone they're wrong or incapable. Instead, they make subtle suggestions that maybe the person's understanding of the situation isn't as complete as they thought. Consider the psychology of a confident person entering a room. They're not just displaying their abilities, they're broadcasting their certainty about how those abilities will be received. They expect certain reactions, assume certain dynamics, predict certain outcomes. Their confidence is built on these assumptions being correct. But what happens when those assumptions prove false? What happens when the reactions they expected don't materialize? When the dynamics shift in unexpected ways? When their predictions fail? Let's examine this in practice. You're in a social gathering and someone is holding court, clearly feeling like the center of attention. The conventional response might be to compete for attention or to directly challenge their statements. But the Machiavellian observes more carefully. They notice what this confident person expects from others: nods of agreement, interested questions, validation of their stories. Armed with this understanding, the strategic mind simply withholds these expected responses. Picture this scenario. The confident person tells what they clearly think is an impressive story about their recent business success. Instead of the usual responses of congratulations or follow-up questions about their achievement, you respond with a thoughtful pause, then say, "Interesting timing on that." Nothing more. No explanation of what you mean by timing. No direct challenge to their story. Just a simple phrase that introduces a seed of uncertainty. Did they miss something important about the timing? Is there context they're not aware of? Suddenly, their certainty begins to crack. The genius of this approach is that you're not giving them anything concrete to defend against. You're not saying their story is false or their success is illegitimate. You're simply suggesting there might be layers to the situation they haven't considered. This forces them to question their own narrative internally. The confident exterior remains, but internally, doubt has been introduced. They begin to wonder, what could they mean about timing? Is there something I'm missing? Another powerful scenario occurs in professional settings. Someone presents an idea with obvious pride and confidence, expecting validation and approval. The room gives them exactly what they expect, with nods and positive comments. But then you contribute with a gentle, almost concerned tone. "This is really thoughtful. I'm curious about how you see this playing out long term." Again, no direct attack, no obvious criticism, just a suggestion that perhaps their thinking might benefit from deeper consideration. What makes this devastatingly effective is that confident people often haven't thought through potential long-term complications because they're focused on immediate validation. Your question doesn't attack their idea. It reveals a gap in their preparation that they suddenly become acutely aware of. They expected to bask in approval, but instead they're now thinking about scenarios they hadn't considered. The psychological mechanism at work here is called cognitive dissonance. The confident person had a clear mental model of how the interaction would unfold. Your response doesn't fit that model, creating internal tension. They must either dismiss your response as irrelevant, which makes them appear closed-minded, or acknowledge that their model might be incomplete, which undermines their confidence. Either way, the certainty that fed their confidence has been compromised. In casual conversations, this technique becomes even more subtle. Someone confidently states an opinion about current events, clearly expecting agreement or at least respectful disagreement. Instead, you respond with genuine curiosity. That's interesting. What led you to that perspective? This seems supportive, even encouraging. But psychologically, it's forcing them to examine the foundations of their certainty. Often they'll realize their opinion was based more on assumption than analysis, creating internal doubt about their judgment. The key principle underlying all these approaches is that you never attack confidence directly. Direct attacks trigger defensive responses and often make the confident person appear sympathetic to observers. Instead, you introduce elements that make their confidence seem premature or incomplete. You're not telling them they're wrong. You're making them wonder if they've thought everything through completely. This internal questioning is far more damaging to confidence than any external attack could be. Now we enter the territory where Machiavellian strategy becomes truly sophisticated. The elementary approaches we've discussed are effective, but they're merely preparation for the advanced techniques that can systematically dismantle confidence across multiple domains simultaneously. These are the methods that separate the tactical from the strategic, the reactive from the proactive. Here, we're not just responding to displays of confidence, we're creating environments where confidence becomes inherently unstable. The first advanced technique is what Machiavelli would call mirrored uncertainty. This involves reflecting someone's confidence back to them in a way that makes it appear hollow or performative. When someone exhibits strong confidence about a decision or position, you don't question the decision itself. Instead, you mirror their certainty with equal certainty about something contradictory, but you do it with subtle indicators that suggest you know something they don't. For instance, in a business context, someone confidently announces their strategy for an upcoming quarter, clearly expecting approval and buy-in. The conventional response is either agreement or direct challenge, but the advanced move is to respond with your own quiet confidence about a different approach, punctuated with a knowing smile and the phrase, "Well, we'll see how the market responds." This creates a psychological parallel. Their confidence is now competing with yours, but yours carries the implication of superior information or understanding. The devastating effectiveness comes from the fact that truly confident people hate the suggestion that their confidence might be uninformed. They would rather be directly challenged than subtly dismissed as naive. Direct challenges let them fight back with arguments and evidence. Subtle dismissal as uninformed creates internal anxiety because there's nothing concrete to refute. They begin to question, what do they know that I don't? What am I missing? The second advanced technique is collaborative undermining. This is perhaps the most Machiavellian approach because it makes the target complicit in questioning their own confidence. Instead of positioning yourself as the source of doubt, you create situations where others naturally begin to question the person's certainty. You become the orchestrator of doubt rather than its direct source. This works by asking seemingly supportive questions that highlight potential weaknesses or oversights, but doing so in a way that appears to be helping the person strengthen their position. I love this idea. Can we walk through how you'd handle the Murphy's Law scenarios? I want to make sure we've thought through everything that could go wrong so we can support this fully. You're not attacking their idea, you're supposedly trying to protect it. But psychologically, you're forcing them to confront potential failures they may not have considered. The genius is that any response reveals weakness. If they dismiss your concerns as unlikely, they appear arrogant and unprepared. If they acknowledge the potential problems, They're admitting their original confidence was premature. If they can't address the scenarios you've raised, their competence comes into question. You've created a trap where confidence becomes a liability no matter how they respond. In romantic relationships, this technique becomes particularly potent. Your partner expresses confidence about understanding you or predicting your reactions. Instead of directly challenging this, you create situations that reveal the limits of their understanding. I love how well you know me. It's going to be interesting to see how I handle this new situation since I'm not even sure myself. You're not saying they don't know you. You're suggesting that knowing you is more complex than they realized. The third advanced technique is temporal displacement. This involves shifting the time frame in which confidence is evaluated. Someone's confidence in the present moment may be justified by current circumstances, but confidence becomes much more fragile when extended across time. You introduce this fragility by subtly expanding the temporal context. A colleague confidently presents their market analysis, backed by current data and trends. The basic response might challenge their data or interpretation. The advanced response acknowledges their current accuracy while introducing temporal uncertainty. This analysis is solid for today's market. I'm fascinated to see how it holds up as the landscape evolves. You're not questioning their current competence. You're suggesting that confidence in a dynamic environment might be premature. This technique is particularly effective because it positions you as someone who thinks in longer terms and considers more variables. The person's confidence, which seemed robust in the present context, now appears potentially naive when viewed across an extended timeline. They begin to wonder, am I being short-sighted? Should I be considering more long-term factors? In social media and online interactions, these techniques require adaptation, but become even more powerful due to the public nature of digital communications. Someone posts with obvious confidence about their achievements or opinions, expecting validation and engagement. Instead of providing the expected response, you introduce sophisticated doubt through seemingly thoughtful questions or observations. For example, someone confidently shares their success story, clearly fishing for congratulations and admiration. The advanced move isn't to congratulate or challenge, but to respond with thoughtful complexity. Congratulations on this milestone. Success stories like this always make me think about the invisible factors that contribute to outcomes. There's always so much happening behind the scenes that shapes these moments. You've acknowledged their success while subtly suggesting their narrative might be incomplete. The most advanced practitioners understand that breaking confidence isn't about winning individual interactions. It's about establishing yourself as someone whose perspective introduces complexity and depth that others hadn't considered. Over time, confident people begin to anticipate your responses, and that anticipation itself undermines their certainty. They start to question their positions before even sharing them, wondering what layers of complexity you might reveal. This creates a psychological dynamic where your mere presence in a situation makes overconfidence feel risky. People become more cautious, more thoughtful, more aware of potential blind spots, not because you've attacked their confidence, but because you've consistently demonstrated that confidence without deep consideration appears shallow in your presence. You've become a walking reminder that certainty is often premature, that understanding is usually incomplete, and that confidence should be earned rather than assumed. At this point, you might be experiencing some internal resistance to these concepts, and that resistance is worth examining. The most common objection is moral. Isn't this manipulative? Aren't we talking about psychological warfare? This objection reveals a fundamental misunderstanding about the nature of social interaction itself. Every conversation, every meeting, every relationship involves influence attempts. The question isn't whether influence is happening. The question is whether you understand it well enough to participate consciously rather than unconsciously. The person who confidently dominates conversations is attempting to influence others to see them as competent and worthy of deference. The colleague who presents ideas with overweening certainty is trying to influence others to accept their vision without adequate scrutiny. The romantic partner who expresses absolute confidence in their understanding of you is attempting to influence you to believe their interpretation of your needs and desires. These are all influence attempts, but they're socially acceptable because they follow conventional forms. What Machiavelli understood, and what his critics consistently miss, is that refusing to engage in strategic thinking doesn't eliminate manipulation from your interactions. It just ensures that you'll be the target rather than the strategist. The choice isn't between manipulation and no manipulation. The choice is between conscious strategic thinking and unconscious reactive behavior. Those who reject strategic approaches don't become more moral, they become more vulnerable. Another common objection is practical. Won't people catch on to these techniques? Won't they see through what I'm doing? This concern stems from imagining these approaches as obvious tricks rather than refined skills. The amateur practitioner might indeed be detected because they apply techniques mechanically, without understanding the psychological principles that make them effective. But the sophisticated practitioner integrates these approaches into a naturally thoughtful communication style. The key to avoiding detection is understanding that these techniques work because they align with genuinely valuable intellectual habits. Asking people to consider long-term implications isn't manipulative. It's intellectually responsible. Encouraging people to think through potential complications isn't undermining. It's being thorough. Introducing complexity into oversimplified narratives isn't cruel. It's being realistic. The techniques become undetectable when they emerge from genuine intellectual depth rather than tactical manipulation. This brings us to a crucial refinement. The most effective confidence breaking doesn't come from applying techniques, but from developing the kind of mind that naturally sees through superficial certainty. When you genuinely think in longer time horizons, consider multiple variables, and recognize the complexity inherent in most situations, your questions and observations naturally introduce doubt into oversimplified confidence. You're not manipulating, you're thinking more thoroughly than the confident person has. A third objection involves reciprocity. If I use these approaches, won't others use them against me? This fear reveals a scarcity mindset about social dynamics. The person who understands how confidence can be systematically undermined is better positioned to protect their own confidence, not more vulnerable to having it attacked. Knowledge of these techniques is defensive as well as offensive. You become harder to manipulate, not easier. Moreover, the fear of reciprocity often prevents people from developing crucial social skills. It's like refusing to learn chess strategy because your opponents might also study strategy. But in reality, the person who understands strategic thinking, even if their opponents do as well, has fundamentally better preparation than the person who refuses to think strategically at all. The game becomes more sophisticated, but you're better equipped to play it. The fourth objection is personal. I don't want to become someone who breaks down others' confidence. It feels wrong. This concern is actually a sign of psychological sophistication, but it's based on a false dichotomy. Developing the ability to break confidence doesn't require using it, destructively or constantly. It's a capability, not a compulsion. But having the capability changes your entire social dynamic, even when you choose not to use it. Think of it like physical strength. A physically strong person doesn't go around demonstrating their strength by hurting others, but their strength affects every interaction they have. People can sense it, and it influences how they approach the strong person. Similarly, psychological strength, including the ability to influence confidence levels, creates a presence that affects social dynamics even when you're being entirely supportive and encouraging. The most important refinement in mastering these approaches is understanding when not to use them. The goal isn't to break everyone's confidence in every situation. The goal is to have the capability available when it's strategically necessary, or when you're dealing with someone who uses overconfidence to dominate or manipulate others. Sometimes the most powerful use of these skills is restraint, being someone who could undermine confidence but chooses not to. Advanced practitioners also understand the importance of rebuilding. Breaking someone's confidence can serve legitimate purposes, humbling an arrogant colleague, deflating a manipulative acquaintance, or helping someone recognize they need more preparation before taking a risk. But the most sophisticated approach often involves strategic rebuilding after the confidence has been appropriately adjusted. You break down overconfidence, then help build appropriate confidence in its place. This creates a powerful dynamic where people learn to trust your judgment about when confidence is warranted and when it's premature. You become someone whose approval actually means something because your standards are clearly high, and whose confidence building is valuable because your confidence breaking is precise. This is influence at the highest level. People want your validation because they respect your ability to see through false confidence. Finally, master practitioners understand that the ultimate goal isn't to control others through confidence manipulation. It's to create social environments where overconfidence becomes naturally unsustainable, where thoughtful consideration is valued over superficial certainty, and where your presence elevates the intellectual standards of every interaction. You become someone in whose presence shallow thinking feels inadequate and premature confidence feels embarrassing. The transformation we're discussing isn't just about acquiring new social techniques. It's about fundamentally altering your relationship with power, influence, and social dynamics. Most people spend their lives reacting to others' confidence levels, either being intimidated by overconfidence or frustrated by arrogance. But what we've explored represents a complete reversal of this dynamic. Instead of being subject to others' confidence, you become the force that shapes it. Imagine walking into any room, any meeting, any social situation, with the quiet knowledge that you understand the psychological architecture of confidence better than almost anyone present. You're not aggressive or obvious about this knowledge, but it shapes everything about how you engage. When someone displays overweening confidence, you don't feel threatened or annoyed. You feel curious about what kind of intervention might be most educational for them and most beneficial for the group. This isn't about becoming cold or manipulative. It's about becoming psychologically sophisticated. You understand that confidence, like any powerful force, can be constructive or destructive depending on how it's calibrated. Appropriate confidence drives achievement, risk-taking, and leadership. Inappropriate confidence drives arrogance, poor decisions, and interpersonal toxicity. Your role becomes that of a social thermostat, helping to regulate confidence levels for optimal use. The paradox that emerges from mastering these principles is profound. The more capable you become of breaking others' confidence, the less you need to do so. Your presence alone begins to discourage overconfidence and encourage thoughtful self-reflection. People naturally become more measured in their assertions around you, more careful in their claims, more aware of potential blind spots in their thinking. You've created an environment where appropriate humility emerges organically. This environmental effect is where true power lies. Anyone can attack someone's confidence directly, but few people can create spaces where overconfidence naturally deflates itself. When you've developed this capability, you're not just wielding influence, you're shaping the intellectual culture of every group you're part of. Conversations become more nuanced, decisions become more thoroughly considered, and group dynamics become healthier because superficial confidence becomes unsustainable. Consider how this transformation affects your professional life. In meetings, you're no longer the person hoping to get heard or struggling to compete with louder voices. You're the person whose questions reveal whether confident presentations are based on solid thinking or wishful thinking. Colleagues begin to anticipate your perspective, which makes them more thorough in their preparation and more honest in their assessments. You've become a quality filter for ideas and strategies. In personal relationships, the transformation is even more profound. You're no longer vulnerable to partners, friends, or family members who use overconfidence to control narratives or avoid scrutiny. Your questions and observations naturally encourage more honest self-reflection and more realistic self-assessment. Relationships become more authentic because artificial confidence becomes harder to maintain around you. But Perhaps most importantly, your relationship with your own confidence evolves. Understanding how confidence can be systematically undermined makes you much more thoughtful about when your confidence is warranted and when it might be premature. You develop what might be called confident humility. Strong beliefs held lightly, clear positions maintained with awareness of their potential limitations. This internal transformation protects you from one of the most common pitfalls in developing these skills, becoming overconfident about your ability to break others' confidence. The truly sophisticated practitioner understands that these capabilities should increase your respect for the complexity of human psychology, not decrease it. Every interaction becomes an opportunity to practice restraint as much as influence. The long-term vision is of becoming someone whose intellectual presence elevates every conversation they're part of, not through domination or show-off displays of intelligence, but through consistently asking the kinds of questions and making the kinds of observations that encourage deeper thinking. People leave interactions with you feeling like they've been intellectually stretched in valuable ways, even when you've been critical of their positions. This is the ultimate expression of Machiavellian strategy, creating outcomes that serve your interests while appearing to serve others' interests as well. When you help someone recognize that their confidence was premature, you're potentially saving them from embarrassment, poor decisions, or missed opportunities. Your confidence breaking serves their long-term interests even when it's uncomfortable in the moment. The journey from here is one of constant refinement. These principles aren't techniques to be applied mechanically, but frameworks for understanding social dynamics more deeply. Every interaction becomes as a laboratory for testing your understanding of confidence, influence, and human psychology. You're always learning, always calibrating, always becoming more sophisticated in your approach. Remember that Machiavelli's ultimate insight wasn't about being cruel or manipulative for its own sake. It was about understanding power dynamics clearly enough to participate in them consciously rather than unconsciously. In a world where confidence is often used as a weapon to dominate conversations, control narratives, and intimidate opposition, understanding how to strategically influence confidence levels isn't malicious. It's necessary. The choice before you is simple but profound. You can continue to be subject to others' confidence games, reacting to their psychological strategies without understanding them. Or you can develop the sophistication to participate consciously in these dynamics. You can remain vulnerable to confidence-based manipulation, or you can become someone whose presence makes such manipulation ineffective. The techniques we've discussed are simply tools. How you use them will reflect who you choose to become, but choosing not to develop these capabilities is itself a choice. The choice to remain psychologically vulnerable in a world where psychological sophistication determines so much of what happens to you.